The story begins with the office of the Duke of Bruggen. Klaus Bruggen was focused on signing important papers, so he almost did not pay attention to the woman present there. The Duke, hardly taking his eyes off the valuable documents, explained to her that he did not require anything from her as a wife. Therefore, he suggested that she go away and not stick her nose out. The young girl could barely control her body from the incredible shaking. She was scared and happy at the same time, so she questioned whether she could really do it. What exactly did she mean? Duke wondered. Did she want to come here again? That young girl asked if it was really normal that she was not doing anything. Klaus Bruggen thought for a moment. It would be his most cherished dream, to be idle every day. Then he caught himself thinking that he had not rested at all for a long time. The Duke finally tore himself from his papers and looked up at his young wife. For the first time, he looked at her more carefully. Then Klaus Bruggen decided to put all the dots on and with his wife, and asked her if she understood the meaning of their marriage, and accordingly, the nature of their relationship. The young wife clearly answered that, of course, she understood that this marriage was arranged and nothing more. The girl also added that she is a sacrificial bride who was chosen by the family council of Louis and who is used to restrain aggression between their peoples. Klaus Bruggen was surprised by her calmness. She should have realized that she was simply used to strengthen the family's position, that her reputation in this castle is at the very bottom. This girl was abandoned by both noble families. This marriage was to become the highest insult for her. But not paying attention to all this, the girl did not look scared or upset. She assured her young husband that he need not worry about it. She will not disturb him under any circumstances. The young girl added that she would live like a hermit in her little room. After these words, Klaus Bruggen had doubts about his wife's sanity. This young girl is the illegitimate child of Count Louis. Roana was a disgrace to the Louis family. She was a symbol of foolish prediction. Her silver hair resembled that of a witch. That is why they treated this girl accordingly. When Roana Bruggen left her husband's study, 2 maids offered to take her to her own room. In her childhood, Roana, as a child born out of wedlock, was not cared for by anyone. By order of the Countess, everyone treated her as if she did not exist at all. When the girl turned 6 years old, she was left without firewood during the cold season. Roana fell seriously ill, but still no one cared about her. Quite a child, she was abandoned by everyone in her own room. For long days and nights, the child lay on her bed and coughed non-stop. From the constant lack of care, Roana almost lost her mind. That young girl persevered. She held on because she had memories from her past life. In those memories, she grew up in a loving family. And she brewed the most delicious coffee in her own coffee shop. Unfortunately, her life ended unexpectedly. The girl got into a car accident when she was going to meet the owner of the house. If we rewind time for some time, then we would witness the following event. The Louis family received a marriage proposal from the southern duchy of Bruggen. The spouses of the counts argued loudly about such a proposal. The wife did not want to give up her beloved daughter Beth, worrying that she would not plunge into dirty politics. Then the count was afraid to refuse the Bruggens, and the couple decided to propose Roana as a bride. After hearing this emotional conversation, the girl decided that she would be better off anywhere but here. The maids led the young hostess to her apartments. They informed that from today she will live here. Roana Bruggen looked around her new room, and she really liked what she saw. In her voice, she said that the design was quite restrained, but surprisingly cute. The 2 maids exchanged glances. They could tell by half a glance at each other that their mistress must have lost her head from the shock of this marriage. Once in her own room, Roana Bruggen told the maids that she would handle everything herself, so they could be free. When the 2 maids left the rooms of the young wife, Roana Bruggen collapsed on her new bed. She could finally breathe. She thought to herself that, although it was a hard test, she now has her own house, and besides, she didn't have to do anything. Life without responsibilities is just perfect. Klaus Bruggen, as usual, was in his office. His assistant was sitting at a table nearby. They were both completely engrossed in their work. The young man, looking through the next papers, was simply maddened with rage. His patience has already completely broken, because after his marriage with Roana, they send more and more ridiculous requests. Klaus Bruggen crumpled another letter out of rage and finally decided to use the opportunity and put them in their place. Let them know who is the boss in the house. When the crumpled sheet of paper fell on the table, the young man thought about his wife. He remembered her words about seclusion. The young duke knew one thing for sure, that his wife did not know how to discipline her servants. Also, the young wife does not make any efforts to understand the Bruggen family business. Klaus Bruggen sometimes looked over the reports about his wife, and according to them, they only do what makes them lazy all day from morning to evening. All these thoughts led him to the fact that he had not received any reports for a long time. So Klaus Bruggen unexpectedly asked his assistant to provide today's report. The assistant was even startled by surprise. He asked what his master meant, and having received an explanation that the Duke wanted to receive a report about his wife, he immediately began to prepare it. After receiving the report, Klaus Bruggen immediately began to study it. After reviewing the first points, his gaze stopped at the count. A wizard. The assistant explained that the young hostess visited him 5 days ago. Klaus Bruggen thought about his uncle. His wife needed to find a wizard? A few days before the events in the Duke's office, Roana Bruggen strolled through the incredible grounds of her new home. Her gaze stopped at a very familiar tree. She even screamed in surprise. It was a coffee tree. But where it ended up here, the girl had no idea. Roana began to go over in her head everything that she had seen here during her existence. And the only thing that was clear was that she had never seen anyone drink coffee here. Then the young hostess called her servant Isa for help. When the maid came, the hostess asked if she knew what kind of plant it was. Isa explained that this is an adantis tree. Adanta, translated from the ancient language of India, means untamed. Roana Bruggen asked her maid, "Is it true that it grows only in the south?" Isa said that this tree is very rare even for the south, and the late Duchess of Bruggen was fond of collecting various plants in the garden. Roana Bruggen asked the maid if she had tasted the fruits of this tree. The maid was shocked by such a question. She explained that the flowers of the tree are worth attention, but no one pays any attention to the fruits. The young housewife simply did not understand why no one paid attention to the fruits, and the maid explained that it was because of the legend. According to this legend, 1,000 years ago, in the light of time, giants and elves lived in harmony with people, but a dark day came when humans attacked other races. And the same thing happened due to the fact that people began to eat Adanta fruits. Roana Bruggen only laughed at this legend. Only children can believe it. But the maid agreed that the legend is a legend, but it is better not to use these fruits away from sin. Isa also added that Adanta fruits taste bitter and are very small. This is not the most appetizing fruit, even if you ignore the legend. The young hostess was even upset by such words. Roana Bruggen hypothesized that Adantis thought about the fruit in the same way as about the potato, which in the Middle Ages was called the devil's apple, and all because the wrong part of the potato was eaten. The young hostess insisted on the answer and repeated the question. Did the maid personally taste the fruits? And she asked with surprise, why should they be expensive at all? The hand of the young hostess reached for the fruits of the coffee tree, and she began to harvest. The maid tried to stop Roana, but the hostess explained that she should take a little with her. When Roana Bruggen said that she had an idea of how they could be used, then the maid broke out in a cold sweat on her forehead. But she did not dare to argue with the landlady. When Isa offered her help to carry the berries to the room, Roana Bruggen assured that she would do everything herself. In her room, the young duchess spread the fruits of the coffee tree on the table and could not help but admire them. She had never been so happy in her life. But then suddenly she realized that the fruits are raw, and she cannot use them in this form. In order to prepare a cup of delicious coffee, you first need to get rid of the pulp, as well as the skin and the pulp. Then the cleaned seeds need to be dried well, fried, and ground. Roana. When Bruggen thought about what she needed to do, she fell on the bed in despair. She realized that it would be simply impossible for her to do it all by herself. But all the same, she wanted to drink a cup of delicious, fragrant coffee more than anything in the world. The maid saw that something was extremely disturbing to her mistress, and what exactly she could not understand. Isa saw that Roana Bruggen looked very disappointed, although she did not understand the reason for such a depressed mood. Then she decided that she would make mulled wine for her mistress. When the maid took the dinner from Roana's room, she noticed that the food was almost untouched. Isa, however, is sure that the miraculous mulled wine can save Roana's mood. At that time, the young girl had the following thoughts. Theoretically, she could dry these fruits and then fry them in a pan. Roana Bruggen has already begun to fear her obsessive thoughts about coffee. She thought that was a ridiculous idea, because in reality, she can't even come close to the coffee she prepared so skillfully in her past life. She lacked quality equipment to make the drink of her life. The girl was simply in despair. In front of her lay the quality fruits of the coffee tree, and she could not drink her favorite drink. Roana Bruggen sat alone in her room and busily went through various options in her head. Finally, a brilliant idea dawned. There is magic in this world. Wizards in their lives are almost like alchemists. It is they who invent all kinds of sophisticated devices and enchanted things. Exclusively interested in magical research, wizards devote their lives to the magical academy. Only science inspires wizards. The rest of the world's values are of little interest to them, and most wizards work with royal families. By investing in ambitious wizards, aristocrats improve their reputation, and wizards receive sponsorship. Then in front of Roana Bruggen had another problem. How could she get them to cooperate with her? This was certainly a star-studded task for the young duchess. The girl took a coffee bean in her hand, and the thought flashed through her that if only she could taste the coffee, then they would agree to help the girl. But after a few minutes, Roana Bruggen clenched the seed tightly in her fist. It seems she found a way out of this situation. Roana Bruggen was very stubborn and persistent, so after a few days she had dried coffee beans at her disposal. The girl firmly decided to go to the tower where the wizard lives. She understood, of course, that they had settled all political conflicts, so she could bring trouble with her visit. But the decision was made final and irrevocable. They needed the help of a wizard and period. All that remains is to figure out how to get him to try these grains. Roana is in front of her. Bruggen became a tower of incredible beauty. But the girl didn't have time to admire the architecture. Important things were waiting for her. When a young girl entered the manor, her attention was attracted by various strange things. It was a little creepy. She thought that this was how she had imagined the wizard's tower. Carefully bypassing all the damn accessories, Roana Bruggen was already standing in front of the wizard's door. The girl's heart was beating wildly. But there was no way back. Roana Bruggen knocked on the door, and after a few minutes, the magician Geralt himself opened it for her. He asked the girl, "How can he be useful?" The magician carefully looked at the girl. But they had never met before. So the wizard asked with whom he had the honor to speak? The young girl realized that Geralt would probably be annoyed by the Duke's affairs, which is why he does not know the Duke's new wife. So the girl introduced herself. Roana Bruggen said that more than a month ago she married the Duke of Bruggen, and the wizard assumed that the girl must be from the north. Roana Bruggen understood from the tone of the conversation that Geralt was not very happy to meet him. Then he completely stunned her with his decision. He is not going to interfere in the family dramas of the family, because he is only a guest of Bruggen Castle. But the young wife of the Duke assured that she did not plan to talk about family disputes. And when asked why she rushed here, the young girl answered that she wanted to offer the wizard something amazing. She held out her basket of adantu seeds and showed it to the wizard. When the wizard took one grain in his hands, Roana Bruggen asked him if he had heard about the unsolved secret of the adanta seed. In addition to Roana Bruggen said that every magician seeks to find a solution to an unsolved mystery. The young duchess asked if he knew the legend of the bright times, when humans first tried adanta and then became enraged and attacked other races. Adanta can have a positive effect on people. The magician was interested. He asked the young girl to tell more about the benefits of coffee beans. Roana Bruggen asked if he ever had to fight the urge to sleep when he had to work all night. The magician nodded. That of course it was, but he did not see the connection with these seeds. The girl then assured the young mage that she could guarantee that the adanta would help him with his studies. Determined, Roana Bruggen offered him to taste them, and for a certain conviction, she put the grain in her mouth first. When she bit into them, her cheekbones almost stung with bitterness, but she mentally reassured herself that she must remain calm. Her future fate depends on this, so she withstood this test with dignity. The wizard, looking at the young girl's reaction, threw a handful of grains into his mouth. But when his teeth bit into the grain, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets from the extremely bitter taste. In his thoughts, there were only machucas, but he could not say them, because his mouth was full of those ugly grains. The astringency made all of his taste buds just burn. He was about to spit out that abomination, but the girl said that it was necessary. Just swallow the seeds. The sorcerer was simply enraged by the fact that he listened to a stranger and swallowed the fruits of adanta. But the duchess offered to just relax and spend the day as usual. And finally, Roana Bruggen offered to visit her in the evening. But the magician said that he would not even think of looking for her. He was returning to the estate, trying to spit out the remains of the bitter grains. Roana Bruggen was sitting in the room. There was only one question in my head. Will the wizard come today? The girl's inner voice suggested that they would still see each other today. When she heard a knock on the door, she even got up in surprise. She knew it was him. The door opened. Geralt stood on the threshold. He was interested in only one question. What the hell did she do to him? The young duchess asked in a calm tone what exactly happened, and how was he feeling. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. He asked if she was really interested in his feelings. He said that his head is lighter than ever, and his body is literally flying. Geralt said that he found a solution to a mathematical expression with which he had been struggling for many months. And also, he is full of strength and energy, as never before. Roana is satisfied Bruggen was simply shining. She called this phenomenon caffeine overdose. But she said out loud that improving concentration and increasing creativity is the true power of Adanta. He asked if it was even legal, and she said that he saw it for himself. The girl understood that this was her chance. Then the girl said that if they process Adanta grains according to a special recipe, they will get the so-called coffee, which has a pleasant taste and an enhanced effect. This is such an iron argument. The magician was only interested in the taste, and if he gets better, then that's already a thing, because even now his jaw dropped from the mention of grains. Then Roana Bruggen explained to the magician that in order to prepare delicious coffee, you need tools that only a smart man like him can make. So that's why she turned to him. The magician understood everything now. He frankly told her that the girl only wanted to use him to make a coffee thing. Roana Bruggen was a little embarrassed by such a frank tone of the mage, but it was pointless to deny it. Moreover, it was the truth. That's why she only asked if he would help her? The magician settled more comfortably in the chair opposite the duchess and offered to devote him to the course of the case in more detail. Roana Bruggen explained the entire process of making a coffee drink and what it would take to make it. The sorcerer understood the whole essence of the process. Only one thing he could not figure out. What kind of person needs to invest so much work and effort just to improve the taste? Roana Bruggen said it's hard to argue with that, because coffee is a really tasty drink. He just had to confide in the duchess. The wizard shook his head. He couldn't trust a woman he'd only known for a day. It's just some kind of nonsense. He didn't sign up for that. Then the girl tried to explain from the other side. Prepared Adantu grains will enhance the chemical effects. This will allow you to focus more clearly for more productive work. The wizard liked these explanations more. It even sounded tempting. And while he hesitated, Roana Bruggen asked to create tools for making a coffee drink. Geralt thought for a while and said that the tools were quite simple, so they wouldn't take much time to make. So this drink should be delicious. Roana Bruggen was quite satisfied with the result of the conversation, so she thanked the magician for his help and hoped to see her in a week. Klaus Bruggen still couldn't get over the fact that his wife was dating a wizard. When he was distracted from his thoughts and turned his attention to the assistant, he asked him what the duchess had forgotten there, because wizards do not like to interfere in politics. The aide explained that they had not been able to find out the real reason for her visit. They watched her carefully, but nothing important happened there. Geralt's house. They were just talking on the threshold of the house, and she left. Klaus Bruggen suddenly got up from his chair. He needs to find out what the hell is going on here. Therefore, first he decided to visit Geralt, and then he thought that he would better talk to his wife. He informed the assistant that he would be back soon and quickly left the office. Roana Bruggen and her maid spent almost every day in the garden. They carefully collected Adanta berries. Today was already the 5th day when the wizard promised to make tools. The maid was worried about the duchess's well-being, so she kept asking if Roana was tired Bruggen. That girl assured that she is completely fine. When they gathered a full basket of berries, the hostess asked the maid to put it on the table and bring an empty one. The girl gladly agreed and went to carry the basket. But when she was going to the table, she saw something that caused the basket to fall out of her hands and all the berries scattered on the ground. Roana Bruggen heard the maid's cry and some sound, but without taking her eyes off the harvest, she asked Isa what happened there. The maid announced in a frightened voice that Duke Klaus Bruggen had arrived. When the girl looked up at her husband, she almost fainted from surprise. They looked at each other in silence for several minutes and did not know what to say to them. The Duke felt like a predatory hunter hunting a defenseless squirrel. Roana was the first to break the silence. Bruggen. She bowed and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Klaus Bruggen noticed that the girl was picking Adanta berries, so he asked if she really wanted him not to interfere in her affairs. But before she had time to answer his question, the Duke came close to Roana and sharply asked if she really met the wizard and what exactly she was trying to achieve. The girl was suddenly confused and began to tremble. The Duke noticed this. He began to suspect her that she was really up to something, since she was reacting to a question in such a way. The wife did not know what to answer, so the Duke went on to say that he hoped that when she said she would live without too much noise, she did not mean to intrigue outside the castle. The husband demanded only the truth from his wife. He assured that intrigues behind his back will not lead to anything good. He was waiting for an explanation, and she didn't even know how to tell him about the coffee. The wife hesitated whether to tell the truth or not. After all, if she tells that I'm making a drink from Adanta, he might think she's crazy. An angel and a demon argued in her head. One said that the whole truth should be told, and the other said that it should not be done in any case. The young duchess lowered her head and said that it was his right to believe her or not, and she would not make excuses now. Afterwards, she should send him a letter inviting him to her chambers. Klaus Bruggen simply shuddered at such a statement. He even asked if he had heard that his wife would send him a letter. Roana boldly raised her eyes and looked at her husband. She said that then he would know the true purpose of her visit to Sir Geralt. Klaus Bruggen noted about himself that no matter how hard he tried to be strict with his wife, he couldn't. He sharply replied that it would be very nice for Roana herself if the reason for her visit to Geralt would be very important. Emphasizing the last word with a special intonation, he turned and left. When he walked out, she breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, it was like a mountain fell from her shoulder. Roana began to consider the reason for the unexpected visit of her husband. Before that, he assured that he would not be indifferent to her affairs. She did not break her promise not to interfere in family politics. His words from their first meeting about without too much noise echoed in her head. But did this mean her complete inactivity? The maid brought her back to reality in time, and they quickly left the garden. A couple of days after this incident in the garden, Roana was disturbed by a loud knock on the door. The maid looked towards the door with interest, but Roana's heart told her who had disturbed them. Geralt entered the room. He politely greeted the two cute girls. As he got closer, he noticed a large number of collected Adantu grains. He complimented the lovely ladies on the quantity and quality of grains. Geralt then handed the bag to Roana and said that it contained the very tools she had asked him to make. When the young duchess took a good look at the treasure that was in his bag, her eyes lit up with true happiness for the first time in a long time. Geralt was the first to get a machine for roasting coffee beans. It had an adjustable heating system. Different degrees of roasting coffee beans reveal their taste in different ways. The girl even clapped her hands when she saw the equipment. She was just the perfect size. She wasn't going to make coffee for the entire duchy. Geralt explained that there was a power button on the left and a temperature control on the right. A girl can increase the heat with a few presses. Roana said they should roast the Adanta beans right now. The girl hesitated about which degree of roasting to choose, light or medium. She was not yet familiar with the local variety of coffee, so she could not decide which would reveal the taste better. So she decided not to risk it and bring the beans to a dark roast. Roana reached for her miracle machine and pressed the button. The machine turned on and began to rotate quickly with the coffee beans. The whole room began to fill with the aroma of roasted coffee beans. The maid closed her eyes from the pleasant smell. Isa expressed her comparison of such a smell with the smell of fried toast or fresh hay. Roana also inhaled this fragrance with particular pleasure. It was simply exquisite and appetizing. Roana was sure that everything would work out for her at the highest level. So she pressed the button and the roasting of the coffee beans stopped. The grains were of a pleasant color and an incredible aroma. Geralt wondered if it was worth going to the grinding of grains, but Roana explained that they should lie in this state for another 3 days. The coffee beans had to rest for 3 days in order for all the carbon dioxide to evaporate. This information greatly upset Geralt, who clearly expected to taste the coffee drink already today. Roana invited Sir Geralt to visit them in the evening 3 days later. Geralt had no choice but to accept such an invitation, so he sadly went to his castle. The young duchess asked the maid if she could deliver the letter to her husband. The servant gladly agreed to carry out such a commission of her mistress, and asked if it did not contain an invitation to Loana's room also in 3 days. The young duchess said that this is exactly what she wrote in the letter, although she is not sure that her husband will come to her, taking advantage of her invitation. She invited him in order to clear her reputation of unfair accusations, although she doubted that he had any interest in her at all. The young wife stood blankly at the window and thought that her husband ruled the whole state, and she was only fulfilling the role of his wife. The young duchess was sure that although she had invited him personally, he would most likely send his deputy. In his office, Klaus Bruggen listened attentively to the report of his deputy about his wife. The deputy reported that Sir Geralt had been visiting Loana these days, but no one knows for sure what he was doing, because Geralt entered Loana's room. Guard Brooke was near the Duchess's quarters and reported an interesting aroma coming from the room. This worried the young duke for no reason. He asked the deputy if he did not think that his wife and the wizard were brewing some kind of potion. The deputy suggested that royals often turn to magicians for sedatives and soporifics, so that's probably what she was doing there. It was the most reasonable explanation of what was happening to his wife, and she collected the fruits of Adanta precisely for the preparation of sedatives. But this assumption of theirs raised even more questions in the head of the young duke. Why did his wife need sedatives? Because she looked so cheerful. Klaus Bruggen has already begun to doubt that everything is fine with his wife, especially in her current situation. For the first time, Klaus Bruggen thought about the fact that he knew nothing about his wife. He never visited her during this time. He was sure that the maids took good care of his wife. Herzog said that his wife invited him to visit her in a week. The deputy said Brooks would be free just in time to visit Ms. Loana. But Klaus Bruggen decidedly said that he would visit his wife himself. And although the deputy reminded that at this time an important meeting with the vassals was scheduled, the duke was firm in his decision. The deputy said he would see to it that the vassals waited another day for the meeting. He thought to himself that perhaps his master was really afraid of his wife, since he decided to visit her personally. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Both men looked at each other in surprise. They didn't expect anyone, but the maid of the duchess came to the door and greeted confidently. She handed a letter from her mistress to the duke containing the invitation. Klaus Bruggen hastily opened the letter and read its contents. His wife invited him to visit him in her rooms after 3 days. Klaus Bruggen was surprised because she said that the meeting would be in a week. Then his gaze rested on the maid. He caught himself thinking that he had never seen her before. Ever since his mother passed away, he had to do the housework personally, so he knew almost all the servants in the house, but he could not remember anything about this girl. The duke thought to himself that perhaps he should have taken care of his wife's maids more carefully and chosen someone better. Then he looked at the maid and asked if she was the only maid. This question simply stunned the maid. She couldn't even figure out how to answer the question so as not to cause trouble for her mistress. But while she was silent and went through the answers in her head, a rough voice brought her back to reality. The duke ordered a quick reply, and Isa said that she was the duchess's only servant. He did not expect to hear such an answer. The Duchess of Bruggen has only one maid. It's just a shame. The maid was no longer confident. Her body began to tremble, so when she heard that she could be free, she ran out of the duke's office at the same moment. The confused deputy also did not understand what he should do in such a situation, so he asked if it was worth worrying about it, and received the answer that it was not. The deputy wondered if it was really possible for a duke to be influenced by an ordinary woman. When the maid returned to Leon, she bombarded her with questions. Did she deliver the letter? What did the duke say? Did he accept the invitation? The maid replied that the duke had certainly not refused the invitation, so there was a chance he would come. In her mind, she wondered if she should have told Loana about their conversation. After a few moments of hesitation, Isa did tell the duchess that Klaus Bruggen had asked if she was the only servant the duchess had. The young hostess could not understand what the hell this information was for. The frightened maid said that she did not understand why he needed the information, and the duke's look was very displeased. Loana Bruggen also thought about her husband's excessive concern for the duchess's maids. The young duchess, regardless of anything, reassured her servant and said that she had done everything right and should not think about it any more. 3 days passed. It was a wonderful morning. The duchess, in a good mood, approached her treasure. Dried coffee beans, Loana raised a handkerchief, which she used to cover the dried beans, and the room was filled with a wonderful coffee aroma. The young duchess almost fainted from such a divine smell. A nutty and slightly sweet aroma reminiscent of the taste of expensive cookies. The satisfied duchess thought to herself that a sufficient amount of carbon dioxide had already evaporated. It's just great. Loana called her servant, but no one answered her. Loana turned her head and searched her maid with her eyes. The room was empty. Then the young duchess remembered that she had asked Isa to bring Sir Geralt's morning. But this did not stop the young duchess at all. She decided that she would do just fine on her own. In addition, it is worth remembering your past. Loana carefully took out her tools, with the help of which she was going to prepare today's most delicious coffee. At that time, there was a knock on the room. The duchess's heart also beat faster, in unison with the knocking on the door. Geralt and her servant Isa appeared on the threshold. The first thing Geralt asked was if they would finally try coffee today. The girls cheerfully informed that of course they would try. But it is worth waiting a little because the Duke of Bruggen is due to come today. They sat down on the sofas and began to wait. The conversation did not stick, so everyone was just silent. Everyone was thinking about his own at that moment. Loana Bruggen understood that it had been quite a while, so the Duke would probably not come. She herself should have understood that the chances of seeing him in her chambers today were too slim. Sir Geralt sat in silence for a while, but then he nervously asked if, the hell, someone would treat him to coffee today. That question brought Loana back down to earth. The Duchess decided it was time to prepare the potion of the gods, so she ordered the maid to bring cups and a kettle of hot water. The maid happily ran to fulfill Loana's instructions. A dripper were on the table. A dripper was a paper filter through which ground coffee is poured with water. Sir Geralt assured that the beans can be ground with a coffee grinder. But in order to start the process of silvering, you must say a special spell. The maids liked such stories very much, so she listened with her mouth open. They poured dried coffee beans into a grinder and began the silvering process. The maid remarked that the aroma was very different from the past. This time it smells like nuts and sweets. This aroma became so incredible precisely because the grains lay for 3 days and the carbon dioxide evaporated. Loana knew perfectly well that a dark roast brewed better with water slightly below boiling. So the Duchess was glad that she had asked the maid to prepare the water ahead of time. Now the filter with ground coffee has been filled with hot water. The aroma has become even more distinct and tastier. Then, through the filter, the water, brewing the crushed grains, dripped into the already dark-colored flask. It was such a mesmerizing sight that no one dared to say a word. A few minutes later, there were 3 cups of incredibly fragrant coffee on the table. The coffee was in front of them in cups. So everyone wants to try this extraordinary drink as soon as possible. Sir Geralt was the first to undertake this mission and bravely took the first sip. When Loana's lips touched the coffee drink, she felt over the moon with happiness. Such a taste would be worth dying for. You could sell your soul to taste this drink. Sir Geralt was also delighted with the taste of the coffee. He remarked that it was much better than gnawing on raw Adanta beans. Damn, it was just unbelievably delicious. The Duchess offered her servant to try this drink as well, so the girl did not boldly take a cup of coffee in her hands. But when she took the first sip, her taste buds just went crazy with the taste. She had never tasted so delicious in her life. It was something unreal. It had a slightly bitter taste, but together with a light bitterness, the taste of nuts and vanilla was clearly noted. Satisfied, Loana listened to hundreds of enthusiastic comments about the taste of coffee and was extremely pleased to be able to present them with the discovery of such a new taste. When the coffee was finished, there was a brew at the bottom. Loana suggested that Isa try to smell the brew. This request somewhat surprised the maid, but she did it anyway. The maid said that this smell reminded her of chocolate, or some delicious caramel. Then she asked her mistress how it happened. They didn't add even a crumb of sugar to the drink. The young Duchess explained that coffee has many different flavors. Coffee beans contain a small amount of sugar, and this sweetness is revealed naturally in the process of frying and cooking. Sir Geralt also tried to smell the remains of the brew, and was also delighted by the unusual and pleasant aroma. He was also surprised that the smell of the caramels was distinct, although he also saw that no sugar was added during cooking. This is where real magic happens. Loana offered to drink another cup of coffee each, and everyone gladly supported such a proposal of the hostess. As soon as Loana got up to make a new batch, someone knocked on the door. Of course, the Duchess wanted to see someone at the threshold of her room, but she did not even expect such a miracle. The hostess told the maid to open the door of her room. Duke Klaus Bruggen and his retinue appeared at the door. It was a real surprise for everyone present in Loana's room. She came closer to greet the guests. Of course, she didn't even expect to see him here today. Her lawful husband explained that there had been some trouble with the vassals, so they had to be delayed. Then the Duke's gaze stopped at Sir Geralt, who was present in his wife's chambers. Sir Geralt felt that piercing gaze with every fiber of his body, so cold sweat broke out on his body. When Klaus Bruggen noticed the cups with some kind of drink, he asked his wife if this was the sedative she had started using. This question simply knocked the ground out from under the Duchess's feet. "What did he mean?" she asked. "What is soothing?" Then Klaus Bruggen asked his wife, "Didn't she ask the magician Geralt for a sedative?" This question confused Loana a little. Then she simply began to laugh, because she already understood what exactly her husband was thinking of when he learned about Sir Geralt. She had also heard that some royals were prescribed sedatives, so she asked what exactly made him think she needed them too. Klaus Bruggen explained that he thought that it was difficult for his wife to adapt in new conditions for her, so she needed outside help. That young wife assured her husband that not having any responsibilities is simply the most cherished dream for her, so she had no problems with adaptation. Loana added that she is living her best life in this estate, which she could only dream of for a long time. The Duchess explained that there was no sedative in the cups, but that the drink was prepared from Adanta fruits. This explanation simply stunned everyone present. They began to whisper about what they heard, and Klaus Bruggen asked if she really made a drink from Adantus. The deputy decided to ask the young Duchess, "Don't the fruits of Adantu taste terrible?" Loana explained that they are only terrible when raw, and when they are dried appropriately, crushed, and skillfully brewed. But then the girl decided that it was better to taste it once than to tell it 100 times, so she asked the maid to bring more hot water and dishes. A few minutes later, there were cups of fragrant coffee in front of the guests. She invited everyone to taste this unusual drink. The men looked warily at the pots and did not dare to take them in their hands. Something told them it must just taste disgusting.
But the young hostess insisted that they still taste the coffee. They did not dare to refuse the Duchess, so they had to try the drink.
They cautiously began to take small sips of the interesting and unusual drink, but to my great surprise, the taste turned out to be simply incredible. No one expected this from them. The Duke's deputy said that at first the drink seems ordinary to the taste, but then an unusual aftertaste and a wonderful aroma appear. Then the young Duchess offered to imagine that a sweet dessert would be served with such a bitter drink. Fortunately, the landlady had several delicious desserts in stock, so she decided to invite her guests to try a new combination of flavors. When the deputy was the first to try this combination, he almost had a taste orgasm. Sweet cookies soak in a hot and bitter drink. This combination is something simply cosmic. Then the Duchess's gaze stopped at Klaus Bruggen. He was still holding a cup of coffee in his hand. Various thoughts swirled in her head about why he wasn't worth a coffee drink. Does he just not want to? Is he afraid that there is some kind of poison? Loana didn't want anyone to force him, so she said it was fine if he just didn't want to pay. But the Duke raised his cup and tasted the coffee. Klaus Bruggen finally finished his coffee drink and placed the empty cup on the table. This could not but please the young wife. The Duke's opinion was very important to her, so she directly asked what he thought about the taste of the coffee drink. But Klaus Bruggen was not very eloquent in this case. He said only 2 words, unique and high quality. The Duchess, of course, expected a more vivid expression of his emotions, but she also considered it an achievement that the Duke did not spit him out. The deputy was also surprised by the Duke's conclusion and corrected him that the taste was simply divine. Such words really pleased the young Duchess, and she invited them to visit her rooms at any time when they wanted to try this wonderful taste of coffee. Then Loana, in high spirits, went up to the Duke and asked him if he was satisfied that she was not making any treacherous plans behind his back. But the Duke found nothing better than to say that his business was finished there and quickly left his wife's room. His entourage was surprised by such an act of the Duke, but the men were still delighted with the taste qualities of this amazing drink. The young Duchess added that coffee, in addition to everything, also has healing powers, and they are as good as the taste of the drink. Young men have suggested that this is how lemon tea for the throat is good, but the Duke's young wife said that it was just like that. But closer to the evening, they themselves will understand all the benefits of the drink. The next morning, the Duke's deputy visited the young Duchess for a cup of coffee. When the drink was completely finished, the young man even covered his eyes with pleasure. It was incredibly delicious, and he couldn't help giving Roana a few compliments about her taste. Then the young man told Roana Bruggen that yesterday he was simply amazed by his capacity for work. Until late in the evening, he did all his work as if in one breath. He was not even bothered by the constant pain in his back, which prevented the man from working for a long time in a sitting position. And as a sign of gratitude, he handed the young Duchess a basket of goodies to go with her magical coffee. But things did not wait, so the Duke's deputy was forced to say goodbye and went about his business. Finally, he said that he would definitely visit the Duchess in the near future. Roana Bruggen was just incredibly high from her current position. What more could one dream of, when no one forced her to do anything all day long? Her only maid came into the room and brought the outer garment. The girl suggested the hostess to go for a walk. Today's weather called to leave the house immediately. The maid asked if they would be gathering Adanta fruits today, and the Duchess replied that everything should be measured, so for today they will rest from gathering coffee berries. Instead, the young Duchess offered the maid to visit some new places in this estate. The maid thought for a moment and offered to visit the bush maze. It was designed and implemented by the Duchess of Bruggen. Roana was very interested in such information. If this distinguished woman planted a coffee tree on her estate, it would be foolish not to visit her bush maze. A lot of time has passed since the death of the Duchess. And Roana thought, does her spirit live in this labyrinth? But what the girl did not doubt was that the Duchess was an outstanding gardener. The decision is made. She is heading into a shrubby maze. When the girls came closer, the hostess asked if they could get lost here. It's still a labyrinth, and the maid explained that the plants were planted here in such a way that no matter where his visitors went, they would still end up in the same place. Lawani really liked what she saw in front of her. They started their walk in very high spirits, but not even 10 minutes had passed when the girls were frightened by some incomprehensible sound. They both fell silent and began to listen. The servant turned out not to be one of the timid ones, so they assured Roana that everything would be clarified now and immediately ran in the direction from where the noise was coming. But when the maid saw what was the cause of such a noise, she cried out in fear. Roana also heard that Isa screamed in fright and decided to personally deal with what was really happening there. So the young Duchess quickly ran to help her maid. But when she ran to the maid, she saw an angry young man sitting on the grass and loudly asking the girls, what old man did they disturb the young man? This was his sleeping place. The bewildered young Duchess didn't even know what to say to this angry young man, who was just yelling whatever he wanted. But the boy screamed that when he rests, no one dares to disturb his peace, neither the servants nor the guards. All these claims began to bore the young Duchess, so she directly asked the young man who he was, and why does he allow himself to behave like that with girls? Parallel to Loana's question, her maid began to apologize to the young master for the inconvenience. Roana heard these words. Then she put together puzzles in her head, and she had a complete picture. It was most likely the younger brother of her husband, Klaus Bruggen. She didn't even know that the Duke had a brother. So, it was Hardwin Bruggen, Klaus's 17-year-old younger brother. And if you believe the rumors, then thanks to his complex character, the guy constantly got into some kind of trouble. Besides, he didn't even dig into his pocket for his word. So, without thinking for a long time, he told Roana that most likely she is the wife of the older brother, and he won't let her stare like that and compare them. But Roana sat down opposite the young man and assured him that she had even thought of comparing them. About herself, the young Duchess said that despite her young age, this young man allows himself to be so daring to strangers. He must be seriously affected by comparisons with his brother. It remains only to deal with the question of why the young Duke sleeps on the ground, and I use leaves instead of a blanket. But she did not find anything better than to ask him directly why he is sleeping here. Didn't he find a place in such a big castle? The young Duke didn't like such direct questions from Roana, but he emotionally answered that it didn't matter where he would sleep, because no one would be looking for him anyway. Roana thought that in the last few months she had spent at this estate, she had never seen him. He wasn't even at the wedding. And she never heard about her brother. But when asked why no one would look for him, the young man blurted out that everyone doesn't care about him. Because he is an inept swordsman and an incompetent student, he is not capable of anything. And then Hardwin Bruggen caught himself thinking that why the hell is he telling all this to a strange girl? Roana concluded that Klaus was so flawless that he simply overshadowed his brother. In high society, only the eldest sons are valued. The other boys of the family are the second grade of the aristocracy. These young people have to get back on their feet without any help from their family. That is why most of them become priests or knights. And as soon as they find a job, they immediately leave their family. Roana could only imagine how hard it was for Hardwin Bruggen after the death of the Duchess. She had heard that Klaus was only 17 when the Duchess died, so Hardwin was only 8 years old. Such events are very traumatizing to the psyche of children, so one could only imagine how difficult it was for him. Roana put her hand on the young man and asked if he was really Hardwin Bruggen. But the irritated boy pulled out his hand and rudely asked, "So what?" His facial expression just screamed to be left alone because he didn't want to talk to anyone. The young Duchess hesitated about whether to violate his personal boundaries, but still decided to get to know the boy. She said her name was Roana, but the disgruntled boy only rudely replied that he was not interested in her name, so she could not call him at all. Hardwin Bruggen snidely leaked that he knew she was desperately trying to get someone over to her side so that she would have at least some voice in this house. Then he rudely added that she was wasting her time because it was of no use to her. But the young Duchess wasn't going to take her word for it either. She told him straight to his face that it was immediately obvious to the naked eye that he had no friends. Oh, this already angered him for no reason. What the hell is she poking her nose into his personal life anyway? That girl assured such an impudent young man that she did not need his support at all, so he could not bother about this issue. She told him that he just discounted her good intentions because she just wanted to be friends with him. After these words, the young man looked at the girl with a completely different look. No one had said that to him since his mother died. Therefore, he frankly admitted to Roana that no one had said such words to him. But it was already time for the young Duchess to return home, so she got up and straightened her clothes. Finally, she said that if he wants to be her friend, then she offers to meet at the same place tomorrow at lunch. Roana and her maid left the garden, and the young man sat on the ground and for a long time could not recover from such an unexpected meeting with his elder brother's wife. When Roana came into the room, the maid told her that the young Duke hardly ate anything at all. The maid said that when the Duchess died, the elder maid took care of the younger Duke. The little one began to eat very rarely. Even to this day, the young Duke only drinks alcohol and eats desserts. He always returns the main course whole. Roana understood that the boy was suffering from some disease of the gastrointestinal tract. The young Duchess asked the maid what the senior maid said about this. Isa explained that the maid says that the young man is special, so she does not pay any attention to it. Roana was simply indignant at such irresponsibility of the senior maid, because 8 years had already passed since the death of the Duchess. The next day, the young Duchess took all kinds of goodies with her and went to the bush maze. When she was walking along the road, she was worried about the fact that the little one would not come to the meeting, but she wanted to help him so much. But when she got closer to the gazebo, she noticed Hardwin. It was clear from the look on his face that he didn't expect to see her here either. Roana thanked him for coming to the meeting, but the little boy defiantly replied that he was just bored, so he decided to lose his temper. They sat across from each other at the table in the gazebo. They were just silent for the first few minutes. The conversation did not stick. Roana decided to somehow correct this depressing situation. She turned to the little Duke, but he was silent. When she turned to him again, she did not receive a single word in response. Then she abruptly got up from the table and was about to leave. She said that if he will not communicate, then she does not see the point of his presence. Hardwin reached out to take her hand. He was very indignant that she wanted to go, because she herself insisted on their meeting today. Roana smiled and clapped her hands. So he still wanted to talk and insisted that she not leave. Then the young Duchess spread delicious food on the table and offered to refresh herself a little, because the time was already approaching dinner. She explained that she had brought some sweets to somehow make it more fun for them. Hardwin was shocked by this attention to himself. The guy asked why she was doing it, and Roana explained that she just wanted to get to know him better. Then the boy said in a calm tone that he was just a useless piece of shit that no one needed. Such words shocked the young Duchess. For the first few minutes, she didn't even know what to say to the young man. But then, gathering her thoughts, she said that there are no useless people. Everyone has their own path. And when she asked what the young man's path was, he lowered his shoulders and did not answer this question. Then the young girl realized that it was enough to torment him with questions for today. So she said goodbye and went to her room. Before leaving, she noticed that the food remained almost intact. Her walks continued like this for a week. When the maid asked if the hostess wasn't tired of fighting against the deaf wall with this stubborn little one, Roana explained that she wasn't tired at all. She did this in order to at least somehow support Hardwin, because she understood like no one else how difficult it was for him after the death of his mother. She herself was in such a position. As they sat at the dinner table in the gazebo, Hardwin asked her not to bring him any more food. He looked at the mouth-watering piece of pie and placed it back on the table. He said he hates food. Roana thought, he was finally starting to talk about himself. So there is hope that all is not lost. She asked what exactly he meant. Hardwin explained that when he eats, he feels guilty. Roana was simply stunned. What could be wrong with the old man? For what? The boy bent down, lowered his head, and muttered that he was worthless, and therefore did not deserve a normal meal. He did not allow himself to use what he did not deserve. So when he feels hungry, he just gets drunk and eats sweets, because he doesn't think that's normal food. Roana listened dumbfounded to the young duke's explanation. Then he suddenly asked Roana if she thought he was pathetic. And the girl replied that of course she didn't think so. The young duchess finally understood that Hardwin does not have an iota of faith in himself, which is why he behaves the way he does. The maid, who was also present during the conversation, decided to offer the young duke to try milk or juice. Maybe she will quench his thirst. But the young duke was only indignant at such a proposal. He is not a child to drink milk. The maid apologized for such a suggestion. Meanwhile, Roana was going over in her head various options that she could offer to Hardwin. She understood that excessive pressure could only cause a protective reaction from the young duke. She wondered what else could be offered to a young man besides milk and juice. Then a brilliant idea flashed in my head. If he doesn't mind drinks, maybe he'll try this? Roana poured fragrant coffee into his mug. The young duchess explained that she had cooked it from the fruits of adantu, and that it tasted quite good. Hardwin questioned whether it was really from the adantus fruit. And the girl explained that she calls such a drink coffee. That's why she wanted to treat him too. Hardwin twisted the cup in his hands in disbelief. Somehow he did not dare to try this drink. But when he did take a sip of coffee, the bitterness in his mouth stirred all the taste buds. He could not understand how this rare abomination could be drunk. Roana insisted that the young duke had not had time to taste the drink, so he must take another sip. But after another sip, the young man's mood did not improve. He said that it was just some kind of disgusting, and mixed with milk it was even more disgusting. Roana knew that a good latte would not be possible without a coffee machine. Latte is a coffee drink consisting of milk and espresso coffee. When it is boiled, a 3-layer mixture of milk, coffee, and foam is formed. Coffee that is brewed by hand is not so rich, so of course it is not suitable for making a latte. Therefore, additives dilute it too much. Espresso is indispensable here. Espresso is a method of preparing coffee by passing hot water under pressure through a filter with ground coffee, hence the name of the drink. But Sir Geralt did not give the exact date of manufacture of such a machine. Sir Geralt explained to the young duchess that it was a rather complicated machine, and it would take a long time to make it. Roana couldn't stand by and just wait for that coffee machine to be ready. Therefore, she had to come up with something that could improve the taste of coffee, which was made in a Turk and would taste good with milk. Then an idea flashed through my mind. The young duchess decided that she would certainly do so.
When Sir Edward came to Roana's in the morning for a pot of fragrant coffee, the young duchess turned to him with a request.
The young man assured that he would do everything in his power to please the young duchess. Then the young duchess asked to visit the kitchen, and she wanted him to be the one to warn the duke about it. Edward assured him that the young duchess could visit the kitchen whenever she wanted. There was no need to inform His Highness. That young girl explained that on the day of their marriage, she promised not to get confused underfoot. And so she worried that the duke would be annoyed when he found out she was strolling around the main castle unannounced. Therefore, I would like to warn the duke about this in advance. Edward could not believe that the duke had made his wife swear to this. Even if it was a marriage of convenience, it was too much. The young duchess asked if he would fulfill such a request of hers, and Sir Edward assured that of course he would. Sir Edward asked if she really needed to visit the kitchen, because if she needs something, then either he or the maids will be able to bring her anything. But the young Duchess needed to get to the right place to prepare the most delicious coffee for the young Duke. So she just smiled and thanked him for caring. A few minutes later, Sir Edward knocked on Duke Klaus's room and asked permission to enter. When Sir Edward went inside, he witnessed the Duke's order to increase the budget for his wife and attract new maids to her. He was counting on the senior maid. The senior maid assured the Duke that he should be absolutely sure that she would perform everything at the highest level. Edward guessed that it was about Roana. Edward also mentally agreed that the budget for the young Duchess should definitely be increased, although this whole "don't get confused" situation was just terrible. Then the Duke ordered the maid to proceed with the order immediately and dismissed her from the room. Duke Klaus asked Edward what was the reason for his visit, and the young man said that it was Duchess Roana who was the reason for his visit. When the senior maid heard that it was about Roana, she threw such a cold and hateful look at Edward that he felt a little uneasy. The look sent shivers down Edward's spine. He looked around and saw the maid slam the door loudly as she left the office. He still hoped that it just seemed to him. Duke Klaus asked what exactly happened to his wife. Edward hesitated a little as to whether he should report this to the Duke, but still said that Roana wanted to visit the kitchen of their castle. The Duke was very surprised at such a report. Why should he know about it at all? He could not understand this. But Edward explained that the Duchess was worried that her visit to the kitchen would inconvenience the Duke. He, in turn, was even more surprised. Why would she inconvenience him? Then Edward said that the Duchess had remembered the promise not to get lost underfoot. After hearing this, the Duke was somewhat upset. Klaus was completely lost in his thoughts. He remembered this promise and their conversation. Drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. He couldn't help but remember something. He was shocked at exactly what his wife thought of him. As soon as he wants to improve his care even a little, he finds out that this is exactly how she thinks about him. It's true, he looked very cold and unapproachable. Even some animals were afraid of him. But "don't get confused under your feet" was already too much. The Duke was pleased with his decision to increase his wife's expenses and increase the number of maids at her disposal. Therefore, he hoped that she would appreciate the true intentions of her husband. But most of all, he was worried about how he should explain why he didn't let her stay in the main castle. Therefore, being completely in his thoughts, he crumpled up an important document. When the Duke came back from his thoughts, he looked at Edward and said that the Duchess could visit the kitchen as many times as she wanted. He was happy and said that he would pass everything on to Roana. When the Duchess found out that Klaus would not be against her visiting the kitchen, she decided to take advantage of this opportunity right away. A few minutes later, she was in the kitchen. There was an incredible working atmosphere there. The cooks were focused on preparing the food and did their work with zeal. When the head chef saw the Duchess in front of him, he almost dropped the knife from his hands. He asked in shock what could be useful. If she had any wishes, she could convey them through Isa. But the young Duchess said that she did not want to eat anything special. She wanted to cook herself. Then the head chef became even more worried. Maybe she wants to cook something special for Duke Klaus? The young Duchess couldn't help but smile on her face. It was obvious that the head chef was taking care of the Duke's safety. She suggested that he must be worried about her poisoning Klaus. Roana assured the cook that she would not be cooking for Duke Klaus. The head chef breathed a sigh of relief. The head chef took out his notebook and asked what exactly would the young Duchess need, and Roana began to list the necessary ingredients. For starters, vanilla, a little powdered sugar. When he carefully wrote down everything he needed, he closed his notebook and immediately went to bring everything the young Duchess asked for. After a couple of minutes, everything she needed was on the table in front of Roana. Vanilla extract, powdered sugar, crushed nutmeg, honey, and warm milk. The first thing the young Duchess did was pick up a nutmeg. She would need it later, so she put the spice away. Well, it's time to start working wonders in this kitchen. Roana was determined. To begin with, the young Duchess took a spoonful of honey and added it to warm milk. Everything was thoroughly mixed. Then I added a teaspoon of vanilla and a spoonful of powdered sugar to this mixture. And the last touch in this wonderful picture was the addition of brewed coffee. So the drink of the gods came out. No witchcraft. When she mixed the drink, the entire kitchen was filled with an incredible aroma. Loana poured the prepared drink into a thermos that Sir Geralt had made for her. It is he who will keep warm and pleasant taste. She could have sworn at that moment that no person could resist such a drink, even so reclusive a young man as Hardwin. Loana hurried to the gazebo. She was sure that the young duke was already waiting for her. And she was not wrong. When the girl came closer to him, she cheerfully greeted the young duke. The young man yawned and nodded to Loana in greeting. The maid told her mistress in a whisper that the young duke had only been on alcohol all yesterday evening. He didn't even touch a single piece of candy. Loana realized that Hardwin had been starving all day. Therefore, it is not surprising that he is always so lethargic and constantly wants to sleep. The young duchess placed her basket of goodies on the table in front of the boy. But the boy said indignantly that he had repeated 100 times that he was not eating anything, so why was she carrying food? But Loana said that she already understood that he was not eating anything. Can he drink? So she brought him something. The duchess took out a thermos and shook the drink in it. The young duke explained that everything depends on the drink, so if she brought that disgusting latte again, she can just pour it out, because the young duke is not going to drink that abomination. But Loana explained that today she prepared a completely different drink for him. Loana deftly poured the coffee into the mug and elegantly shook it with a fake nutmeg. It was a mesmerizing sight. So Hardwin kept his eyes on the cooking. In just a moment, the young duke was in front of a finely prepared honey coffee, similar to liquid gold. But the young duke will ask Loana if by coffee she means the bitter black pulp that she brewed from Adanta beans. And Loana nodded approvingly. She was the one she meant. But the boy said that this is not possible, because last time it was dark in color and had a different smell. And the young duchess explained that this time she added more ingredients during cooking. She handed him a mug with a fragrant drink and explained that it was one of the types of coffee, but prepared especially for him. The young girl handed him a cup of honey coffee and offered to taste it while the drink was still warm. That is how he will be able to feel the subtle notes of all the ingredients. Hardwin picked up the mug of coffee and looked at its contents in disbelief. Of course, he had no desire to try coffee after the last experience. Nevertheless, curiosity prevailed over common sense, and he took the first sip. Loana stood aside and watched the young duke. She wanted him to appreciate her efforts. Even when he held the mug in his sleeve, he was pleasantly surprised that the drink was warm to the touch. But when the taste was fully revealed, the taste recipes were delighted. A deep taste of honey and a light aroma of cinnamon and a hint of vanilla were felt at the same time. Everything together played an incredible symphony of taste. The creamy texture of milk was successfully harmonized with sweetness and a good aftertaste that remained in the mouth for a long time. The little duke could not guess that it was really coffee. It could not be that those bitter Adanta seeds, which of course he ate as a child, could be so tasty. This barely perceptible hint of mountain was successfully combined with other flavors. He had never had anything more delicious in his life, but he was even more impressed by the realization that he had not been worth anything warm for many years of his life. He has already forgotten how nice it can be. But before the young duke could move away from the taste shock of the coffee drink, Loana deftly handed him a plate with fragrant buns. They looked very appetizing. The young duchess, with a sincere smile on her face, offered to give these delicious buns a chance. The boy just looked at those goodies with wide-open eyes. They really looked appetizing. He, as if hypnotized, could not take his eyes off them. The young duke's hand reached for the buns by itself, although in his mind he firmly decided not to eat any food. But in a moment, he was already eating that delicious bun. His taste buds were over the moon with pleasure. Inside, everything played with some kind of pleasant warmth. Loana asked how her guest tasted. She prepared everything herself for the young duke today, so I had hope that he liked everything, but instead of words, his eyes filled with salty tears. They began to drip faster and faster on the table. He himself could not understand what was happening to him. She did not listen to him and just dripped and dripped. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had cared about him since his mom died. All he remembered from his childhood were the words of his maid, who only told him that bad people don't deserve food. That's why he constantly had to think about how inept he was while Klaus was eating dinner. But when the older brother came closer to ask something, Hardwin did not know how to get rid of his insignificance and the complexes that the maid so mercilessly imposed on him. When the older brother asked the younger why he did not see him at dinner, Hardwin did not even know what to answer him. Weed simply explained his absence by saying that he was busy with something very important. Or he just smoked his lower lip and was silent. Compared to all the responsibilities that his older brother performed, Hardwin felt like nothing, and that made him withdraw more and more into himself. Roana couldn't just watch the guy lose his emotions, so she walked up to him and put her hand on his shoulder. When her hands caressed the little one, he calmed down a little. He felt such support and care, and he had missed this so much for many years. When he calmed down, he sincerely thanked Roana. As soon as Hardwin calmed down, the young duchess suggested that they all return to the estate today. She explained that whenever they break up, she then worries about how he got to his room, so today she would like to go with him. Hardwin did not expect to hear the words that someone cared about him. This surprised and pleased him at the same time, so he agreed to such a proposal. He resolutely approached Roana and her maid. The girls were both happy and surprised. Satisfied, Roana caught herself thinking that from today she has a younger brother, whom she is so happy to worry about. They all returned to the estate together. Everyone's mood was high. Everyone was happy with today. But on the way, they met Sir Edward and Duke Klaus. No one expected such a meeting. Roana was the first to defuse the situation. She quickly approached the men and greeted them. Roana thanked Sir Edward profusely for his concern and for fulfilling her request. Today, she took advantage of the permission and visited the kitchen to prepare a meal. But Duke Klaus came closer to his younger brother and asked what he was doing here in the presence of these young ladies. He did not think that she communicates so closely. Therefore, he was waiting for a reasonable explanation of everything that happened here. Hardwin felt like a little boy in the presence of Duke Klaus. Compared to him, he was just an empty place, so he stammered and could not utter a word. But having gathered all his strength, Hardwin told that he and Roana met near the bush maze not so long ago. Klaus clarified, "Aren't these the bushes where he walks his studies?" Hardwin understood that his older brother was angry with him for absenteeism, but he had neither the desire nor the need to study. Therefore, he hardly visited them. Duke Klaus stood and looked sternly at his younger brother. He was angry that he did not want to study. For the first time in a long time, Klaus noticed how small and thin his brother really was. Of course, he dreamed that Hardwin would start exercising his brain and body by attending classes. But Klaus understood that if he ordered him, Hardwin would never listen to him. He could feel his younger brother hating the Duke. When their mother died, the older brother was left with overwhelming responsibilities, and he was not up to the upbringing of his younger brother. Therefore, he abandoned his education altogether. They stopped meeting even for dinner, because the younger brother was always looking for excuses not to come there. And Klaus had to have dinner alone. He just looks at the empty chair where the younger brother should have been sitting, and the chair was empty every evening. When he tried to ask why he was ignoring him at dinner, he always just ran away and didn't explain anything. And the older man didn't have time to ask questions either, so they each lived their own lives. Here they were standing opposite each other, so familiar and so different at the same time. They didn't even know what to talk about, even though they were brothers. Duke Klaus was aware that he had to behave like an adult, so it's time to say something. But what exactly he had no idea. Therefore, he simply called the name of his younger brother. But that Hardwin sounded so harshly that the younger brother began to tremble with fear. Duke Klaus ordered him to go to class immediately and stop being a fool. That was all he could say to his brother. Roana witnessed this conversation. She felt with every cell of her body how unhappy Hardwin was now. So she decided to stand up for him. There was no other way out. So she stepped forward and stood before her husband. She raised her head and boldly looked Klaus in the eyes. She was determined. That little guy was already scared, and she had to save him. Roana looked into the Duke's eyes and directly asked him if he was even interested in what his brother was going through every time. Duke Klaus explained that of course he didn't do it directly, but that he received regular reports about his younger brother every day. Therefore, he is aware of all events. Roana plucked up the courage to say that she hoped she wouldn't poke her nose into his own business, but she didn't think simple reports about his own brother would be enough.